Hi, welcome to Infodumpies. My name's Brianne. I'm autistic, I have AuDHD, my pronouns are she, her, and I actually secrete a pheromone that specifically attracts people with IBS.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Violet. I have ADHD. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm here today in place of the AI named Blylet that's usually here.
So today, we're doing some mini dumps.
Yeah, some little bitty ones.
It turns out y'all really like that format, and she's in the regular rotation now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to go first. By the time this episode comes out, my topic is going to be very old news, but I don't care. And I think that the people who are not into skincare might have just missed when this happened, and it's funny whether or not you give a shit about skincare stuff. So are you aware that at the end of 2023, an urban legend was born via a Sephora review?
I believe it. It sounds like something that is plausible to happen. Although an urban legend?
I think it constitutes an urban legend now.
Okay.
So I already freaked out at it when I started learning about it. So you've gotten some background about this.
Mm-hmm.
But someone, most likely a literal child, claimed that in their review for Sol de Janeiro Delicia Drench Body Butter, they claimed they went from seeing a single wolf spider once every few years to once a day while using this body butter.
Okay.
They left a 1-star review, and I thought I would do a dramatic reading of their Sephora review.
Oh, that sounds fun.
So you get an idea. Yeah, so you get an idea of this alleged wolf spider attracting lotion.
I love that. Let's go for it.
1 star. All caps, so I will be respecting their choices. Scent attracts wolf spiders. If you're scared of wolf spiders, watch out for these lotions, LOL. I wanted to love them so bad. But one of the ingredients is like kryptonite to wolf spiders. When I put it on, instantly one will come out. Normally, I'll see one like every 3 years. Used this and it was every day. I stopped using it and haven't seen one since. Oh, and one time, the spider wanted to eat whatever ingredient it is so bad that it chased me. I swear on everything. I'd run left, it ran left. I ran right, it ran right. Like it was legit following the scent. And no, the scent isn't that good. Nothing a $5 vanilla cream can't match. So yeah, do be careful if you're frightened of spiders, especially the big wolf ones. Also, please don't hurt them if you do wear this and they appear. Use a cup and put them outside. Sorry for a disappointing review.
Wow.
End scene.
Wow.
I will say it did bother me that Superman is not attracted to kryptonite.
Yeah. Unless it's pink kryptonite, maybe, then.
But yeah, no, that was the actual review that started it all.
That is a wild review because, so my first impression, I haven't actually read the review. I've heard you mention this, as you mentioned before, but I have not read the review. This sounds genuine enough that I would probably believe it if I read it. But you said it was an urban legend, so that lends me to think maybe it's not true.
I definitely think it was made up, and I think it's a bored teenager.
Okay.
So, people were freaking out over this review, because it's funny, right?
Yeah.
The review it caught internet fire when someone on Reddit cited a study from 2009 that discovered that there are 2 fragrancing compounds used in cosmetics that are actually compounds that some female spiders produce as pheromones.
Oh, God. Okay, so there was scientific backing to an otherwise just meme trolley post.
There was the illusion of scientific backing, which I'll get to.
Okay.
It's not. It is a costume of scientific backing.
I see.
The Sephora subreddit kind of went fucking wild with this. And this led a user named Hey It's Just Choco on the Sephora subreddit to do some spider science, and I'm using SARC marks for that. In their post, they said, I will experiment today and keep you updated. Update 4 hours. I have seen 2 spiders at work. One came at me and one didn't. I putted some cream on a tissue to see if it would interest a spider. Will update soon. Update 10 hours. Spiders went to the tissue paper. I think they are attracted to the pheromones of the cream. Not exactly a double-blind clinical study where they put some Jergens on one tissue and some Sol de Janeiro on another.
Yeah.
This, I think, was for lying for fun.
Yeah.
Either they were lying or they have a completely unrelated issue with tissues that attract spiders.
Oh, yeah, that's true, because some tissues have like lotion and whatnot, so...
But again, there's no way that it has those pheromones.
Right.
So nobody seemed to care that the paper from 2009 was looking at skull spiders. And it said that these compounds, I will attempt to pronounce to the best of my ability, it said that these compounds, farnesyl acetate and hexadecyl acetate, had to be combined in very specific dosage to have any effect on spiders.
Huh. And a cream ain't gonna do that.
Even more so, Sol de Janeiro doesn't use those compounds in any of their products.
Okay. So, I mean,
None of them.
Yeah, that effectively just seals the deal. It is 100% fakery.
But this became such an ordeal that Sol de Janeiro actually had to make a post this last January assuring people that their body butter is not attracting spiders.
That's so good. I love when that happens and a major corporation is to come out and say, no, our lotion doesn't attract spiders.
And they made it cute. They said the scent may attract people, but it won't attract spiders. And like, it's still...
Okay, yeah. But behind all of that, there's a heavy sigh and a, no, it doesn't attract spiders.
It doesn't
what are you
fucking
talking
attract
about?
spiders.
Right.
Yeah, so this was just fun. And like, it's going to be the wolf spider lotion forever.
Yeah, honestly, like they should, honestly, if they wanted to really capitalize on it, they should come out with a lotion called Wolf Spider that is like a fierce scent or something like that. And
all of theirs are like Brazil themed things. So if there's some spider native to Brazil or something, that would be
probably.
You know what I mean? Yeah. But anyway, that's
like do a crossover with some zoo or something. And
yeah, that's my mini dump about the lotion that allegedly makes spider horny.
That's great, honey. Thank you. You got games on your phone?
I actually do now. I didn't before, but then Sean and I started playing Scrabble literally yesterday. So I have a single game on my phone.
Well, that's good. I'm glad that you're finally embracing your inner gamer girl. When you send Scrabble word, do you know how it get to Sean?
My love of the game and my dear love for my friend.
I almost did an actual spit take there. Kind of, yeah. Basically, that's how Wi-Fi works. So when you send data to the internet nowadays, a lot of times you're using Wi-Fi, and that's what I'm going to talk about. And I'm also going to cover Bluetooth, because Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are kind of inextricably intertwined in a way that will make sense here in a bit. But Wi-Fi stands for wireless fidelity. Wireless fireless is what it stands for. No, it stands for wireless fidelity. And essentially, Wi-Fi is a combination of multiple inventions that kind of came together to form a connection that enables you to connect as if you were connected by wire. It's a way of transferring data through radio frequencies, specifically radio frequencies. So just like you've got a radio at home, probably in the attic somewhere, because we all use, Spotify or whatever. You may have a radio somewhere. You know how you've got, 102.1 The Edge or whatever. That doesn't exist anymore.
Sweetheart, that has been defunct for, I believe, a decade now.
Yeah, I was just tossing one out there that doesn't currently exist so we don't accidentally sponsor someone. But here in Texas, there is a 101.1 98.1 or whatever. And there's all, 98.7 K Love, all those radio stations. That is a
Radio
specific.
stations, yeah.
Yeah. That is a specific frequency that you are tuning into. And I'm not going to get too far into it because this is just a mini dump, but basically the way Wi-Fi works is both the sender and the receiver of the Wi-Fi signal are sending radio signals, and the way it's sending information rather than just like sound like a typical radio does is it manipulates those radio frequencies at regular intervals. So when you think of a radio signal, you might think of like, it's a wave that's traveling through the air, a wave of energy essentially, and that has a frequency. That frequency is the actual wave itself traveling up and down based on that frequency. And so if you were to put that on like a chart to look at the frequency, what Wi-Fi is doing is changing that frequency with like every wave essentially. So you've got a wave at this frequency, that frequency, this one, this one, this one, this one. And by switching to specific frequencies, you can send data, if that makes sense. So let's say this isn't actual numbers, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to send you a frequency that means W 3 times, and then a frequency that means dot, and then a frequency that means Google, and then a frequency that means dot, and then a frequency that means com, and so on and so forth. I'm going to send you a frequency that is the binary data that your computer can then translate into an image. It really just goes from there. Now, that all sounds like kind of magic, essentially. And for the longest time, I didn't understand how Wi-Fi worked. If you try to look up who created Wi-Fi, you'll get different answers. And the conclusion that I came to, and this is just my opinion, is that it was kind of invented by 3 different people coming together. So it was someone, an orgy of technology, if you will. But
come.
Essentially, you've got the invention of signal hopping, which is that switching radio frequencies around. That was invented by the actress Hedy Lamarr. She was also very much like a very scientifically minded person, like an engineering minded person. Hedy Lamarr, who was originally named Hedwig Kiesler, I believe. Hedy Lamarr emigrated to the U.S. in 1937 and caught the idea of a film producer named Louis B. Mayer while traveling by ship from London to New York. And she would end up working on over 25 movies and doing a whole bunch of acting, which that's a lot at the time, back when production took a lot longer and was very different. Her, as with many of the female roles at the time, her career often depended on her look. And while she's still famous for performing and being what was often called the first depiction of a female orgasm on cinema in one of her first movies,
damn,
Ecstasy,
Hedy.
which that was banned in the U.S. for decades. But when the camera stopped, her passion was actually in science and innovation and invention. With her inventive mind, she actually developed, along with a little bit of help from an American composer named George Antheil, a secret communications system is what she originally called it. It was 1942. It was in the midst of World War II. And one of the ideas that she had was this secret communication systems by, as I mentioned earlier, manipulating radio frequencies at irregular intervals between transmission and reception, which would form essentially what she called an unbreakable code, although there are ways to intercept that we know now with having so much more technology. But it was a way to send a radio signal, and only if you knew the correct intervals, essentially the key to decode what the frequency would be, you would be able to get all the message if you didn't have that key. So if I'm sending you a signal at 100 megahertz, 10 megahertz, 25, 30, and then a whole bunch of frequencies, unless you know the specific pattern of frequencies to look for, you wouldn't get the whole message. You'd only get pieces of it. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, that was the core thing. That's kind of at the core of how Wi-Fi and Bluetooth work nowadays. They're both radio signals that are being modulated. With Bluetooth, it is a short range signal, very, very low energy, low frequency. So that makes for some key differences. Bluetooth is not as fast, but it is easier to kind of form that connection because it is a very consistent standard. It is very mobile. It's not the positioning that it works with, because it's very low frequency, you can move around and not break the signal. Whereas with Wi-Fi, you get higher speeds, but the positioning, like where you are in relation to the thing transmitting the Wi-Fi, matters more because it's a higher frequency. So it's more susceptible to getting absorbed into things. There's a whole bunch of differences, but they're both radio signals. Bluetooth is just a very specific way of doing those radio signals. Now, how do we get from coded messages to Wi-Fi? There were two more inventions that had to happen, and these people are also credited with quote unquote inventing Wi-Fi, but I really feel like it was Hedy Lamarr and these two people working together. The second thing that happened was John O'Sullivan, the engineer, not the person who was a signer on the Declaration of Independence. So John O'Sullivan is a engineer who worked at the Dwingeloo, I'm not sure if you say that right, Dwingeloo Radio Observatory in the Netherlands. And he co-authored a paper in the Journal of Optical Society of America titled Image Sharpness, Fourier Optics, and Redundant Spacing Interferometry. All of that to say, yeah, smart guy. He introduced a technique for sharpening and improving the picture clarity in radio astronomy images. So basically, he improved the stability and clarity in radio signals in general, this technique that he developed. He did work with some other people on it, but he was the primary contributor to this work. So he was the one who said, let's take this from just a radio signal to something much more precise that can now transmit data more accurately. After that, then we're looking at Vic Hayes. At this point, there was the idea of transmitting data already being used in radio astronomy. The only thing that it needed to bring it to a consumer commercial level was really a way to standardize the use of this and get it into devices. Victor Vic Hayes was born in 1941, and he actually established as part of there's basically a standardization group called the IEEE, and I forget what it stands for. But IEEE, they're basically the people that determines what are the standards of how we use the internet. They're the organization that determines, okay, what's the standard way people are going to connect to Wi-Fi. Specifically, Vic Hayes was the one who developed the 802.11 standard working group, which is basically how Wi-Fi works. So oftentimes you'll hear Wi-Fi referred to as 802.11 Wi-Fi, and
okay,
that
oftentimes you will hear that in your circles. I have never heard that in my life. Just giving you a baseline for what the audience probably knows.
That's probably fair.
No, you don't need to apologize. That's just me going, hey, you know about this skin thing, right? And you're like, I've never heard that word in my life.
Yeah. Honestly, yeah, that's fair and accurate. Vic Hayes was the person who basically created that standard and pushed it to become an international standard so that you can use Wi-Fi anywhere. Imagine, for example, you know how when you go overseas, they have different outlets for their plugs?
Oh, yeah. So there could have been a different way to connect to Wi-Fi. Your devices might have had to have had some sort of way to almost like a VPN almost just to connect to Wi-Fi. Kind of, yeah.
So most likely you would have had to have either a device that can span whatever other frequency the UK was using or whatever other part of the world was using, or you'd have to have a swap-outable device. Like back in the day, they had PC cards, which is like an expansion card for a computer. You would have to swap out like your Ethernet adapter, essentially, or your Wi-Fi, your network card, in order to be able to use the UK style frequency. He's the one who made sure that didn't happen. For that, he received a ton of honors. Most specifically, in 1998, he received the IEEE Standards Association's Standards Medallion for the internationalization of the IEEE 802.11 standard, which is essentially Wi-Fi as we know it. He is often the person referred to as, quote, the father of Wi-Fi. But I really feel like without John O'Sullivan, without Hedy Lamarr, we wouldn't have it. You know what I mean? And without Vic, it wouldn't be the standard.
He wouldn't have anything to standardize without the other two.
Exactly. So yeah, that's Wi-Fi. That's how it works and how it came about.
So it is the love I have for Scrabble and Sean that sends my word.
Yeah, exactly.
And also some other things, but also the frequency of my love.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how it works nowadays. They reinvented Wi-Fi later on. It's the LOVE standard. No, I'm just kidding.
Yes.
What else you got?
Okay, so my next mini dump is something that I was considering for a full dump, but then in my research, I actually found that someone created an entire podcast for this.
Oh, God.
So I am going to cover some of the things that are not necessarily covered in that podcast and then recommend that to anyone else who's interested, because I am talking about ASMR. Do
Okay,
you know
yeah.
what ASMR stands for?
Automatic.
Nope.
Autonomic.
Close.
Amazing, super, mega, real good sounds. Amazing sounds.
Autonomous sensory meridian response.
Whoa.
I listen to ASMR daily. I am extremely particular. If someone is chewing on something, I think they should be hurled into the sun. I hate it.
Fair.
It's the worst thing. I'm very particular. I prefer no talking. I have my needs. I have things I like, and I have the things that make me want to pull my spine out like I'm deveining a shrimp. So,
yeah,
I'm very particular, but I use it as background noise when I'm writing and to chill out when I feel like I'm about to have a meltdown, to kind of wind down before bed while I use my Theragun. If you listen to my solo dump about a sensory diet, I talk about ASMR.
Yeah.
I was curious about when the term came about because the feeling of ASMR, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So, the feeling of ASMR, it describes this involuntary tingling sensation. And it starts at the top of your head and it moves down the back of the neck and sometimes the rest of the body. And people also describe it as a calming feeling that starts at the top of the head and washes over the body. I think of the calming feeling is more what I would describe mine as. Like, sometimes I get the tingly thing, like, more intensely. I don't know. It's very calming. It's a very specific feeling. And either the thing gives me that feeling or it is just sounds.
I know for me, I actually don't get an ASMR response from like ASMR videos. I have some like physical stims that do that. For example, if someone like gently brushes their hand along my arm, it's something like gently, like in a loving way. That's something that can give me ASMR.
And there are ASMR videos where they do like a mirroring thing to give someone the sort of it's called mirrored touch. And they will do the very specific on the forearm in the video. And for a lot of people watching that visual ASMR is enough to give you the tingles of as though you've had someone doing that.
Interesting. I'll have to try. That's so cool.
Yeah.
Sheesh, even I'm learning stuff on this Infodumpies.
Yeah. So like I get that when, as you know, when people play with my hair. So there's ASMR where someone has basically a wig they've turned around on a thing and they're playing with hair, but it's like right by the microphone and it's binaural. So it goes from ear to ear and just the sounds as though someone is playing with your hair, for me at least, also gives me ASMR.
Interesting. That's really cool.
So yeah. So I was curious because like this feeling genuinely has to be as old as humans.
I imagine, yeah.
We've been getting it from the beginning. You'd think I would have heard about the term ASMR much, much longer ago than I had.
Yeah.
Like I would have known about it as a kid. And from what I was finding, there are writings where people try to describe the sound. I didn't pull the passage, but Sylvia Plath apparently has a passage that is definitely describing ASMR.
Oh, interesting.
But yeah, it can be triggered by things like whispers, tapping, scratching, visual stimuli like slow hand movements, repetition, and close personal attention,
Yeah.
which would be your trigger.
Very cool.
So when I went searching, I knew why I hadn't heard about it long. The term was only coined in 2010 by a YouTuber named Jennifer Allen.
Very cool.
So before 2010, there was a post on a forum in 2007 that sparked the internet's interest in sort of codifying what produces this feeling, what this feeling is. That started the conversation around it.
Interesting.
And between 2007 and when Allen coined the term in 2010, there were some terms that people were trying to get started. One of them makes me acutely uncomfortable, and I'm glad that didn't stick. But some of the terms that were kind of tested out were attention-induced head orgasm.
Oh, don't like that.
Hate it.
Yeah, that's so much more sexual than it needs to be.
Yeah, and there's nothing sexual about it, for me at least.
Yeah.
If there's something sexual about it for you, I'm not going to yuck anyone's yums, but for me it's just
fair.
a platonic thing.
Yeah.
There was also unnamed feeling and attention-induced attention-induced observant euphoria. So those are some terms that were kind of
very cool
fiddled around with. The post was from a website called steadyhealth.com in 2007. And it was on a forum there that said, "Weird sensation feels good."
I've seen that one on a lot of forums.
So that was such a huge post that people are like, "Oh my god, I've been trying to find a description of this feeling." Yeah, and it was something that people were coming back to that forum years later going, "Oh my god, yes, I found this," trying to search for if there was a name for that term. I get this from blank, and that sparked a lot of the discussions about what causes it.
That's so interesting because I almost imagine prior to like maybe the 80s even, if someone were to try to describe that, I feel like they would get dismissed as crazy. Even if the person had a similar feeling, there wasn't really good terms to describe the feeling yet. So that's so interesting.
And not everyone experiences ASMR.
Oh, interesting.
So there was a study, and I forget who I was talking to, but someone's like, "I don't get ASMR. Like, I don't experience that. It's just annoying to me. It's just noises." So I had gone down a rabbit hole looking up, like, what makes some people experience ASMR more, and I felt called out because, like, one of the top studies was people who experience ASMR score higher for neurotic behavior in psychological tests and stuff.
Oh, jeez.
And I immediately was like, "Shut the fuck up, bitch." And I like closed it and stopped looking. So I don't know that it's that scientific, but I felt extremely called out. And
that's
while
really cool.
the research, and this sparked people to actually start researching it more.
Cool.
Because when you hear about, hey, this sound helps me calm down, like just the sound, that makes things pretty interesting. And that sort of started the birth of the ASM artist, which is what you call someone who makes ASMR on the internet.
Oh, cool.
So the research is really limited, but there was a 2018 study that put an extremely small group of 10 people into a functional MRI while they were viewing ASMR to see what it did to their brains.
Oh, that's such a good idea.
So when the actual tingles began, their brains showed activity in the areas that control emotion, empathy, and social engagement, like grooming behaviors, for example, like playing with hair.
Interesting.
I find the social engagement part really interesting as an autistic person with alexithymia, because I don't really get tingles from the more intimate personal attention ones. So the person not staring at me, but just brushing a wig in front of like the camera and around the binaural microphone, that'll do it. But the personal attention where it has someone staring me in the face and they're making it look like, so for a lot of those ASMR, they'll have the camera and they'll have the microphone set up where and when they brush one side, it is like they're brushing one side of your face.
For the audio viewers, I just stared very strongly at the camera.
Yes, she stared directly into my soul. But they make it look like they are sitting in front of you doing these things to you. And those don't give me tingles. Those give me like fight or flight response.
Yeah, same.
I cannot do them. Some of them get to role play sort of level, which I can't do. I cannot suspend my disbelief. They're like, welcome, you're getting a haircut today. All right, what would you like done to your hair today? And I can't suspend my disbelief.
Same.
Not for me. But I find the social engagement part really interesting because those are the ones I don't like.
Interesting. I haven't really seen a whole lot of ASMR myself. To be honest, I haven't sought it out previously, I should say. But I know the ones that I have tried were ones where it's like the wig brushing ones. Those actually I have a hard time listening to. Those actually make me go, no, because it feels like there's something happening right near my ear. So I get like a bug-y kind of response from it. And
there is also an element of skill for the ASM artist to know what is too much, what is too intense. Like the sound mixing is a level that even as someone who makes audio drama, I don't think it's a completely different thing.
That's very fair. But I've never tried one of the ones where you have someone really like staring at you. But like I've never had a problem with eye contact in real life, really. But I imagine that would just be uncomfortable. Someone like pretending to stare at me is not for me.
Yeah, there's some ASM artists where they will be doing something and then look back up at you and look down. I'm okay with that. Like one of my favorites is one of the, I would say, classic OG ASM artist, Whispers Red. And she is a very lovely English woman she has the most calming whispered voice. And some of her favorite ones I like listening to are her making tea.
Oh, that sounds kind of nice, actually.
Yeah, and her talking isn't the, oh, you're doing so great, I'm so proud of you, this is this, blah, 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 blah. Her talking is, this is a really lovely green tea that my husband brought back from a trip to Japan. Which cup should I use? I think I'm going to use this cup. And you hear like the kettle boiling, and she'll gently crinkle the little package for the tea and like kind of gently tap on things. She is chef's kiss, extremely good at it. But she's not staring into my soul. She'll look back at you. And it's not like all my attention is on you. That doesn't bother me.
I almost wonder if someone did ASMR, but instead of doing those things in like a video and then speaking about them and like having the sound, I wonder if you could describe those feelings to someone and have them kind of like imagine those like sounds happening and get an ASMR response. Because like just you describing like the kettle boiling and stuff, it didn't give me an ASMR response, but it kind of put me into like, I could picture all of it happening. And I wonder if you could elicit ASMR response.
But just the slow talking, deliberate, softer voice, that sort of thing is the core of ASMR. So I think someone whispering that to you for an ASMR, you don't know if it's the description of the thing or their voice in the first place that's doing it.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, so the research also suggested that ASMR may be causing the release of neurohormones like dopamine, oxytocin, and endorphins.
Oh.
And this would explain the calm, sleepy feelings people get from ASMR. Like, if a video is going to produce the tingles, the ASMR for me, I will get sleepy. I've often woken up by dropping my phone on my face because I fell asleep in the middle of one.
That never happens to me, a person with narcolepsy.
Never a narcoleptic woman. And yeah, so the research into ASMR is extremely limited and very new, but There's compelling evidence that it can help with pain relief, sometimes for hours after listening to it.
Wow.
It can help with deeper concentration because of the neurohormones, which just anecdotally for me, I 100% think there's a connection, because if I need to get work done and trigger hyperfocus, I put on ASMR, and it's usually a specific type of ASMR, and like that's one of the things I use to help distract my ADHD so I can get writing done.
Interesting. Very cool.
Yeah, that helps. I can trigger hyperfocus with ASMR really easily. And the release of neurohormones can also help mood and sleep quality.
Hell yeah.
And one of the things that I found when I was reading about it, one of the areas of research that I thought was interesting is that they're currently looking into ASMR as a potential therapy for autistic people, which makes so much sense.
Absolutely.
And it looks like they're also considering autistic people who may get overstimulated by the sounds. Because from autistic people I've spoken to, either we are deep into the ASMR, or any ASMR is like, dear God, no, that's hell. I think for our spectrum of audio experiences.
Yeah.
So I can see how a lot of it, because there has been a trend of aggressive ASMR.
Oh.
That I'm like, what's the goddamn point? They do the things really fast and all around you, and they're changing triggers a bunch. And I hate it.
Good.
It's stressful. So I imagine for someone whose, audio sensitivities are different than mine, yeah, even the slow stuff might be a lot,
Yeah.
But in the research, it seems like they're considering that, and they're looking at strictly visual ASMR as an alternative for those autistic people who might be overwhelmed by sound.
Interesting.
Which the thing that gives me visual ASMR the most is, when people will post videos of them with a puppy in their lap, and the puppy is asleep, and they're giving the puppy a little massage.
Mm-hmm. Oh my
I get those on every single one of those videos of just seeing a puppy get a little massage sitting in a lap.
Oh my
looking super relaxed. So that kind of visual ASMR could be used as a treatment to help autistic people chill out and help with meltdown reduction and help with stuff like that. And it makes me excited they're looking into it, because it is finally research that is not, how do we make someone less autistic? And it's
Right.
more like, oh, it's hard being autistic. Could this help with some of that stress? Let's find out. So it's really early.
Really cool.
We likely won't know a lot. I know that this autistic person finds it extremely helpful. And if you want to know, I kind of laid off the whole history of ASMR quite a bit, because I discovered there is a whole website called ASMR University, and it naturally has the audio history of ASMR. And you can listen to that. Yeah, you can listen to that on the ASMR University podcast. So I have added that to my listening queue, because I would love to listen to that.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. And like ASMR, I haven't done it. I haven't gotten super into it because I've never gotten an ASMR response from a video, but I've got some things to try now. And like part of this has me kind of wondering speculatively, like maybe this is some sort of primordial, like evolutionary leftover type thing from when we were all apes and had, we picked bugs out of each other's hair and stuff like that. And that, the want to let someone do that maybe is the origin of that or something. I don't know. That's wild.
Yeah, there's something about it that feels like, I think there was an evolutionary purpose for this.
Yeah.
And I would say still probably.
Yeah, some kind of like social, gentleness, like maybe even like a parental thing. That's really interesting. I'm going to have to look up some more about that after this one. So yeah.
And I will give you some suggestions for some of my faves.
That sounds good. Well, we got one more thing for me to talk about. And
hell yeah.
Knowing me, it's another technology thing. And it's not a video game. It's just a technology thing because I like a play on the pewter. This technology thing is one that I find really, really cool and really interesting. It's forensic data recovery. Or just data recovery in general. I say forensic because it's often, the term forensic data recovery and data recovery are kind of used interchangeably sometimes. Usually when it's forensic data recovery, you're talking about a situation where you don't know who owns it or you're trying to identify the owner, whereas just data recovery is my hard drive broke, fix it, get the data off, please. I like both. They're both essentially the same practice. It's just different situations. So for the purposes of this, I'll call it data recovery. When we're talking about data recovery, what are we talking about? We're talking about recovering the information from someone's computer after it has been destroyed or they've deleted something. If you take a file on your computer, and again, I come from a Windows mainly environment, so talking about recycle bin and stuff, if you take a file and you drag it into your recycle bin in Windows, that does not delete it. And strangely enough, if you then right-click the recycle bin and go empty the recycle bin, and it says, are you sure you want to delete these things? And you click yes, that still doesn't really delete them, because there's actually two other things that are kind of in the way of that data being completely gone that data recovery specialists and forensic data recovery people use to recover files. There is something built into Windows. This is like kind of the first level that really anybody can do at home. If you can actually test this out in some ways by, if you have this enabled on your computer, which most Windows computers by default have this enabled on their boot drive, the drive that your system is on, you can test this out at home. There's a process built into Windows since Windows Vista called Windows Vista Volume Shadow Copy Service. It's a big name. Most people just call it VSS. There is no graphical user interface for this, and normally, in the past, you would have had to go into the command line and access this built-in functionality that isn't normally accessible using text commands, which I don't know about you, but 99% of people don't use text commands when they're interacting with the computer if they're not a Linux user. Exactly. Now, working in IT, I do use those more than the average person, but I work in IT, so like that makes sense. Nowadays, you don't have to go through all that to look at use that shadow copy service that's built into every version of Windows since Vista. There is a program called Shadow Explorer. It's a free app. You can download it. If you just Google Shadow Explorer, pick on the one that doesn't look sketchy, that's the one. And basically, that is a graphical front end or user interface for the Windows Vista Volume Shadow Copy Service. That Volume Shadow Copy Service, what is it doing? What it does is it automatically tracks changes that you are making to files that are saved on your hard drive. Whenever you move a file from one folder to another, whenever you rename a file, whenever you delete a file, create a file, all of this is tracked in that copy service in the background. It's like a hidden little service. Windows is just keeping an eye on that. And the reason that that is built in is specifically to be able to recover files. And Shadow Explorer, if that is enabled on the drive, lets you just look at what it has saved in that copy service, which is really cool. And also the name Shadow Explorer is just a cool name.
Yeah.
By the way, all of these like softwares, with a couple exceptions, have really cool names. But Shadow Explorer, it's free. You can literally just use it in a second. And I think there's a portable version as well, so you don't even have to install it. And it lets you look at all of those shadow copies of files that are saved on your hard drive. Let's say somebody went in and just deleted your favorite pictures off of your hard drive. If you have this enabled...
My glossy JPEGs...
Your glossy JPEGs, yeah. Your crisp PNGs.
Of a hot dog.
Even your girthy TIFF files.
I don't know girthy TIFF, but I'd like to.
Yeah, I think we'd all like to. She's a great format. But let's say somebody went in and deleted all of the files out of a really important folder by accident. And not only did they delete it, they permanently, quote unquote, deleted it. Fun fact, if you press delete while having something selected in Windows, it sends it to the recycle bin. If you hold shift and delete, it just permanently deletes it. I say permanently, and nothing's quite permanent when it comes to this sort of thing. So let's say somebody did that. They permanently deleted a whole bunch of files. All of those changes, all of those files, and a copy of them would be saved in that shadow copy service. So you could just open up the shadow copy service, generally using Windows or Shadow Explorer, and get those files back. Literally just as simple as drag and drop. It's really that easy nowadays, which is wild. Now, let's say you're talking about more of a forensic situation where you're a detective or whatever, or you're an investigator, and you arrested someone on suspicion of some crime, and you think that they may have evidence that points to them on their computer, but they deleted everything. They knew you were coming, and they just wiped their whole hard drive. They said, delete everything.
It's their PowerPoint presentation on how to rob a bank.
Exactly, right. You've got this person's hard drive. You plug it into your computer. You could use Shadow Explorer and see if the last thing that was done was delete the evidence, and you could just pull that evidence right out of there. But let's say it's all encrypted, or it's all buried, or it's all erased, and you're having a hard time. There is another piece of software often used by law enforcement and forensic data recovery people that is very robust. It does that same thing as Shadow Explorer does, but a lot more. This software is called AuDHD, which it is.
Jesus.
Yeah. It's a cool name. I don't like that it's associated with cops very much, because I'm gonna be honest here, fuck cops. Yeah, but it's free software. Anyone can download it. Cops aren't the only ones who can use it. But it does seem to be built with law enforcement in mind. So just keep that in mind if you are, like, essentially, trigger warning. It has like a dog cop as the logo, which is like such a betrayal, personally.
How rude to dogs.
Right? But the software itself is really cool. What you can do is run AuDHD. You'll create a case in the program, and then you can just say, all right, scan this entire hard drive, and it will look over every file on that computer, and it will look inside of the files on that computer. It will look in the shadow copy service, and it will look at any remnants of files that it can piece together into some piece of information, and then just give you a report and say, here's what I could find. It's really wild. And it only takes like a few minutes to scan your entire computer top to bottom. And just to give you an idea about how robust this software is, I tested it on my work computer because I work in IT, like I said, and I do data recovery for people at work, because you would not believe the number of people that keep important files in the recycle bin. Whew, that's a whole other Infodumpies.
Don't understand that. That's like saying I'm going to put this in the trash in case I need it later.
Exactly. Yeah. And part of the reason is people's disk space fills up on their computer. And the thing is, if you try to move a file onto your computer and you don't have enough room, your computer will give an error at you. But if you put it in the recycle bin, it won't. And that's because it's deleting the old stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
listen, I'm not good at pewter, but I know that if it says we don't have space for a single file more, there is an issue.
Yeah, there's a bigger problem, and those
are the people who ignore the check engine light because they're like, well, I'm driving fine right now, so.
Exactly. Yeah, and so their solution is just, well, I'll put it in the recycle bin, because when I save it there, it doesn't give me an error. So I actually had a person tell me, well, the recycle bin doesn't have a space limit. Oh, buddy.
It's not a fucking TARDIS.
Some people treat it like a TARDIS, but really, like, it just deletes the oldest stuff, and you can configure how old, but this AuDHD will literally scan your computer, and I tested it on my computer. It was able to pick out metadata, which I'll explain that in just a minute. It was pick out metadata from an image in a PDF file that I had zipped in a compressed file in my downloads folder. Metadata, to be clear, is data that is attached to a file that is not part of what the file is for. So, for example, the metadata, if you downloaded this podcast, there's very likely there would be metadata saying this was produced by Mixnomer or something like that. Or this is the date that it was recorded. That is not the file itself, but it's data about the file. Metadata. Does that make sense?
Yes. If you look it up for Infodumpies, it is probably a bunch of nonsense, honestly, because I do whatever the default of our recording software. If you look at the metadata for today's lucky winner, James is fastidious and makes sure everything is extremely accurate. So
what AuDHD was able to do in a matter of minutes was go, all right, I see that there is a zipped file. And if you have a zip file, that means it's compressed. You've taken the file and taken the data, removed all the empty space, and squished it to where you can't read it outright without decompressing it. It took the zip, it decompressed it, looked at the PDF that was inside, and looked at every individual image embedded in that PDF and scanned each one for metadata and found the name of the artist that created an image in a PDF file inside of a zip file.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. Powerful, robust tool, completely free. In terms of data recovery, how far does this go? How far can you recover stuff? Because this also pulls information from shadow copies too. When you're talking about the physical construction of a hard drive, and I'm talking about a traditional hard drive, not an SSD. SSD being essentially a fancy flash drive, internal flash drive, basically, which I'll get into the difference of those in a minute. But I would be getting into a full Infodumpies at that point, so I'll be brief. If you take a hard drive, a traditional big old brick hard drive, metal case, you know, and you hit it with a hammer 14 times and toss it in the dumpster, I bet you I could get the data off of that. Because
knowing you, yes.
Yeah, the way that hard drives are constructed, there's essentially roughly 4 main components. So there's the housing of the hard drive, which is essentially a solid steel case generally to protect it, because there's delicate stuff inside. Those delicate components being, there is a little control board, which is a circuit board that tells the hard drive how to function. It has a little bit of memory to know, all right, it remembers where some stuff is, as well as something called smart data, which tracks data about the hard drive, such as if there's any errors on the hard drive, what's the temperature of the hard drive, all sorts of stuff. There's a microcontroller essentially that controls the hard drive. Then you have what's called the spindles, which are little tiny, if you think of it kind of like a record player, imagine you've got a vinyl. That's one of the platens, as they're called. And then the arm that reads the vinyl, in this case, that would be called a spindle. And what a hard drive is basically is a stack of really densely packed, full of information CDs, and they're just stacked on top of one another. And stuffed in between each of those like CDs is a little spindle that reads the data off of that disc. So
it's playing every My Chemical Romance album at the same time.
Right. You could. The way hard drives have so much storage, if you imagine like, you know, you've got a floppy drive, it's got that little floppy black metal, or not metal, but like kind of like a tiny vinyl inside. What they did was they took CDs and they made a little reader, and then they just put a whole bunch of them inside of a box. The most delicate part of all of this is probably the platens. Those are the metal discs that actually contain the data. It's changed by the spindles and all of that stuff. All of the data on it is rearranged in a permanent manner. So let's say you hit that hard drive with a hammer 14 times and yeet it in the dumpster. I could probably take the shell, the metal housing of that hard drive off, and because it's solid steel, you may not have actually hit any of the platens or even the spindles. You might have probably messed some things up, but nothing I couldn't just, you know, kind of squeeze back into place and put a new housing on it and I'm good to go. Let's say you busted it open and you destroyed the little circuit board. Well, we could probably put a different circuit board on from the same model hard drive and read the data off. When we're talking about data recovery, how do you prevent it from being recovered? Really, the only way to completely protect your data, if you really want to get it deleted, is with magnets. Because the way data is stored on a hard drive is through electrical, or essentially magnetic charges. You know, positive and negative represent the ones and zeros of data on the drive in very tiny little segments. If you run a magnet over that, it just changes it all to 1 or zeros and just literally destroys the data itself without destroying the hard drive. So magnetic destruction is really powerful, though, believe it or not, there's still some ways to recover data from that using the actual microchip that's on the hard drive itself that stores a little bit of data.
Wild.
About the information. It's crazy. There's so many techniques now that you can use to recover data. It is so difficult to delete data in a permanent sense. If you have sensitive data, there's actually laws talking about how you do it, and companies that their whole purpose is to professionally delete data and destroy hard drives. So what they'll do is they'll take this company, all they do is say, all right, you've got data that needs to be destroyed. you can't just put it in a paper shredder like you could with a printed document that's sensitive, or you couldn't incinerate it that you could, right? Because this is like a solid steel housing, and temperature isn't necessarily going to change the data. You run a magnet over it, and then you break the hard drive up into so many tiny little pieces that you can never put it back together again, is essentially what these companies do. Yeah. And then you just mix it with a whole bunch of other broken hard drives. So you've got this giant pile of tiny little shredded hard drive pieces. Yeah. That have been magnetically degaussed, which is the term. And that is how you permanently remove data from being able to be recovered. Now, obviously, there's some cases where, if a platen gets completely destroyed, you're not going to recover data very easily. And obviously, the more damage, the harder it is and the more expensive it gets. But the amount of times I've seen data recovered off of literal trash is wild. So yeah, data recovery is really cool.
It sounds a lot like trying to delete anything permanently is like, to slay the demon, you must chop it into 73 distinct parts and scatter his remains to different corners of the globes, burying them 6 feet deep.
That is honestly really good allegory for hard drive destruction. Because like, if let's say you're the United States government and you've got top secret stuff on a hard drive, you're going to take this magic rock that makes it forget everything it knows and wave it over the surface.
Yeah.
And then you're going to put it in a machine that destroys it and breaks it into a whole bunch of tiny little pieces. And then in some cases, you will be separated into your base elemental components, the hard drive will, and repurposed or sold. So all of the copper will be removed, the lead will be removed, etc.
Wild.
Yeah. So yeah, honestly, it's kind of like banishing a demon. So, and to be clear, all of the stuff that I'm talking about is stuff that's possible. Most of it is not easy. It's tough to do, and it's a lot of work. I just don't want people to be scared necessarily. If you have a hard drive, obviously don't just throw it in the trash if it's old. If you have an old computer, get someone who knows how to degauss a computer before you give away a hard drive, give away a computer. If you're going to sell a computer, get it degaussed or just put a new hard drive in it. Just do whatever you can to, ideally, don't give anyone a hard drive that you've put personal data on. Really is the best, easiest way to go about it. And
say the sacred incantations using the magic stone.
Exactly. Yeah, just look up the best practices for data destruction. Yeah, absolutely. Be careful, everybody.
Well, gonna put a Jimmy cap on my hard drive.
Yeah.
For safe computing. And yeah, those are our mini dumps.
Yeah.
You've reached the housekeeping section, and it might be the housekeeping section of today's Lucky Winner, and it might be the housekeeping section of Infodumpies, because I am recording a housekeeping section far in advance because we are going to be moving, and I want to be able to have all of these episodes still coming out while we're moving, but I also do need to pack up things in my recording center station in my room, and I don't want to record bad audio for y'all, so this housekeeping section is going to be the same for probably a couple of months. I usually like to wait to record these until closer to the episode because I want our Patreon shout-out people to be up-to-date and accurate. But I think y'all understand that you'll get more episodes this way, and we don't have to pause anything and make you wait longer. And as soon as I'm able to record these closer to the date, I'm going to start doing that again. But in the meantime, here's the housekeeping section for a show. So if you like the episode of whatever show you're listening to at the moment, check out the episode details to find everyone's social media handles. You can find Mixnomer on Instagram at the handle Mixnomer Productions. If you're listening to today's Lucky Winner, all of the cast have their social media handles in the episode details, so you can see what we're doing on the interwebs. And if you want to support us, the best way you can do that is by sharing about the show. We don't pay for ads, and we don't take paid ads, so you sharing the show is the way we grow. Like, word of mouth is the way we grow any of our shows. So if you want to tell someone in your Discord server, in your subreddit, in the grocery store, I don't know, anywhere, you tell someone about it. It helps us out a lot. If you are in a place to help us monetarily, you can find a link to our Patreon for Mix and Elmer in the show details. So when you become a Patreon subscriber, you are subscribing to get content for any and all shows we make in perpetuity, and you get to support everything we do. It gets split among our cast members because we do profit sharing, and we try to make sure that everyone essentially gets the same hourly rate for their work. So when you become a Patreon supporter, starting at the $1 level, you can get access to our Discord server, where we do things like streams where we play Jackbox games, streams where you watch me and Violet play a video game together. I do body doubling. I started doing like a little Stitch and Bitch hour where we do different fiber arts and we just chat. It's like a virtual knitting circle. It's very fun. But when you do that, it's just at the $1 level. You get access to all of that. And then at higher levels, you get access to things like music from Today's Lucky Winner and live recordings of our Today's Lucky Winner episodes and all of the notes from me and Violet and our guests that they make for Infodumpies episodes that have a bunch of links so you can go learn more about a subject that you heard on an episode of Infodumpies. There's lots of cool stuff, and when you support us on Patreon at certain levels, you can also get a cool shout out, like our friends Randy Lovings, Rachel Rachelson, Sewing Seraph, B. Trossler, Smriti Singh, Helen Clifford, M. Mosen, Lucy, and Nicole Valdivieso. And if you haven't yet, it would be really helpful for us if you left a rating and a nice review to let people know that you liked our shows. It helps us get higher in recommendations and on different charts and get recommended to more people. Subscribing also does that, and it costs you nothing, and that helps us out a lot. So if you would like to support us in another way, that's another way you can help us out. But yeah, hopefully I will be having my recording set up at our new house when we get moved to, we're moving from Texas to Minneapolis, so that's going to be a big change. But once we get settled in Minneapolis and I have my recording station set up, these housekeeping sections will be bespoke per episode of show again, I promise. I feel bad cutting corners, and I feel bad that there's some people who might join our Patreon between now and then who might not get their shout out immediately, but again, I would rather get you shows in a timely manner than worry about that too much. I'm trying to not let my perfectionism take over. But that's all I got for you, little buddies. God, if you listen to Infodumpies and you don't listen to Today's Lucky Winner, calling you little buddies sounds condescending. But I promise it's not. But that's all I got for you now, little buddies. Until next time, try not to die. And if you're an Infodumpies listener and you don't listen to Today's Lucky Winner, my ending is... That's my ending. Okay, sorry.